the discussion today is going to be centered around three kind of major points. We're going back and forth, but we're going to talk about the why, what the benefits are of Mentimeter. We're going to be looking a bit at best practices and how you can use Menti to improve learning outcomes and inclusion. And hopefully we'll get the student perspective as well. And as I mentioned earlier, we will be doing a Q&A. So I really encourage everybody to, if you have a question, a thought even to one of our panelists, just throw it in the Q&A and we'll continue the discussion there. I see there's some comments in the live stream. That's great too. The slide showing on my phone is fantastic for accessibility. It sure is. And as you always know, we have the code up top here always. So if you get logged out, you could just copy that again and join. All right, that's it for housekeeping. Let's go ahead and meet our panelists. And first up, we said this earlier, this looks like a band photo here almost. And our first band member is Dr. Gerard Kristandl, an associate professor at University of Greenwich. Gerard, how are you today?
Click the right button. Classic, right? Unmute yourself. I'm very fine. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me too. And should I introduce myself already?
Yes, please go ahead.
All right.
Yes.
So I am an associate professor at the University of Greenwich in Southeast London. And at Greenwich, I am the Mentimeter lead, academically speaking, and we have regular liaisons with Mentimeter, of course, and I have to blame it all on Martin Compton because he brought in Mentimeter when he worked at Greenwich, and I was then honored to take over from him as a lead. So I think that should be it. Oh, well, I'm with the Greenwich Business School, and I'm also a learning technologist, so check of all trades and hopefully a master of at least one.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was just about to ask you how you found out about Mentimeter, but that was through Martin, who already had it set up when you joined. Yeah. Thank you for that, Gerard. Sorry?
I blame it all on him. Thank you, Martin.
Blame it on him. And next up, we have Marianna, who's a learning technology officer at Cardiff. Marianna, tell us a bit about you.
Hello everyone. Good afternoon. So my name is Mariana Meisanova, and as Oscar already mentioned, I am a learning technology officer in Cardiff Learning and Teaching Academy from Cardiff University. We've been pretty much very in a similar position like other panelists here, using Mentimeter for numerous years now. And my kind of specialty is to, well, from the beginning, very start, which goes back to 2018, I was leading the educational element of teaching our colleagues, our staff, members of staff, how to use it. And now we kind of moved from that to the kind of concept of why is Menti good and why we want to keep going and keep using it. So yeah.
Thank you. And Marianna, I'm
thank
curious.
You for having me.
Thank you for joining. Do you remember your like first encounter with Mentimeter? Like, did you vote or how did you?
So I was, to be very fair with you, one of the people who joined our webinar today is Martin from Swansea University, who actually brought in the Mentimeter, and so I inherited, once he left Cardiff Uni, inherited his legacy, and I had to say I was petrified when it came to having that big responsibility of designing and training other colleagues within the uni. But the first ones, what I remember was very much the quiz. So very straight into the fun element, I guess. So I had a rather very nice kind of transition to, to use it.
That's nice. Yeah, I also actually came in contact with the quiz as well. It is fun, and also it worked very well to keep attention high when
Attention.
you're doing. I remember doing Swedish verb quiz, and it was very popular, and they all remembered all the verbs. Thank you, Mariana,
Thank
for
you.
that introduction. Next up is Rob Shaw, who's an educational advisor at the University of York.
That's right.
Welcome.
Thanks, Oscar, and thanks for having me. Yeah, so I work in a central team here at York in the north of England, and we look after the university's virtual learning environment and related tools, including Mentimeter, and we provide advice to academic staff in the university on learning design and how to integrate learning technologies and approaches at activity, module, and program level. That's us. And in terms of Mentimeter, personally, I love the fact that any of our sort of training sessions with staff can start with something about what everybody's bringing into the session. On a personal level, I love any of the interactions that make me feel like a 1970s quiz show host. So the spinning wheel to select who should go next, and the drum rolls and things like that. There is a danger it turns you into a bit of a teacher-centered and rather cheesy sort of you can take a rather cheesy approach, but it adds to a lot of fun. And on a very serious level, I think the fact that it gives students or participants an opportunity to join in anonymously. That's what I should say in terms of what's the most valued. We did a quick survey of some of our students, and providing a channel for anonymous questions came out at the top of our kind of list.
For the students.
Testing for the students, testing your knowledge and diagnostics. They all scored in the sort of 90s for kind of positive, but anonymous questions was by far the top there.
Great.
Just to prove it's not about me.
Yeah, and we'll be following up a bit more on that kind of university-wide approach as well. Finally, we have Dr. Martin Compton, who we've gotten an intro here as the exposer of Menti to other panelists here. Martin, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. Thanks very much. Thanks for inviting me. I've known Mentimeter for a long time now, actually. So my current role is at UCL, University College London. We're, apart from the Open University, which is a distance institution, we're the biggest university in the UK by student numbers. I think one of the things that I've really appreciated in my institution now and in my last institution is that Mentimeter is available. In fact, this isn't an announcement. People know this who know me. I'm moving institution in June. I'm going to King's College London, and they don't have Mentimeter. So I may have another hard fight on my hands because I think it's such a valuable tool. I really do. My role is as a faculty developer, teacher educator, but with a real interest and draw to digital technology, digital ideas, embracing digital aspects of things. And I first encountered Mentimeter when I was preparing for a presentation for a job interview at Imperial College London about 9 years ago now. And I noticed that they had Mentimeter as one of their institutional tools. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to try this because, the free version gives you just enough to hook you in. It's an absolutely brilliant balance. They've got it dead right there, Mentimeter. And I used it, and I didn't get the job, but I was hooked on Mentimeter. So it served me well. And from then, I really wanted to push for its adoption at Greenwich. But we did due diligence, we consulted on a range of similar tools, and it was hands down the winner across the board in terms of ease of use, functionality, breadth of utility. And I think it remains so in amongst its competitors.
Thank you very much, Martin. And we'll be digging a bit deeper in the why of Menti as well later on. Thank you to all the panelists for being here. I'm really looking forward to digging deeper here. And I think I want to start with Rob, because Rob, you mentioned something with your students that you saw a lot of satisfaction from your students with anonymity. But what would you say is the value of having your full teaching staff, of having them access to Mentimeter as a part of their tool belt?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Oscar, because it was quite well used at the university before we took it on. We've only relatively recently had it available as an institutional-wide, centrally supported tool. We started at the beginning of the academic year 21-22. So we already had a lot of people who really liked it, who knew how to use it, and had already sort of had the chance to spread the word about it. But actually having it as a centrally supported tool has done a few things. I think it's sort of accelerated growth quite a bit. It's made it easier for the kind of people who use it well and spread the word in their own local programs and departments to do a better job of increasing use within their teams, I think. And it's also given a chance to explore other ways to use it. So some of the kind of possibilities for using it within our distance learning programs for asynchronous interactions, to add some variety and interest and different forms of asynchronous working as well. So I think it's kind of done that more than anything, just raised awareness, increased growth. And I think that gets people who may not have otherwise used it started with it. When they see a new institutional tool that, people have fed back to us that was, in some cases, what got them started. They may not have done that if it hadn't been an institutional tool.
So for, I guess, as you're saying, for adoption, it's key to have it as a tool, and then having it spread organically, I guess, or via.
Yeah, I mean, it helps to kind of give it a momentum and a focus when it's the university tool for classroom polling rather than one of a number of sort of competing tools that individuals are using, I think. Yeah. But the fact that it's easy to use, easy to pick up, there isn't a great big barrier to getting started. Some of the tools we've had that tried to do a similar thing in the past were good, but they were a lot harder to get started with, and that is something that isn't a problem with Mentimeter.
Great, thank you so much, Rob. And just a reminder to the audience here as well. I'm gonna put this on. If you have any follow-up questions to our panelists, pop it in the Q&A, and we'll keep the discussions going. I want to move back, focus to our students again, and I have a question for Mariana. What feedback have you gotten from the students as you've used Mentimeter more?
Well, we had conducted a kind of university-wide survey back in 2021, and into how is Menti being used within the student communities and in their learning and teaching as well. And although it was done during the exam period, so the uptake wasn't as great as we hoped for, but we had about 350 participants, 350 students who took part in, and we received a fantastic, really, really positive feedback on not only enhancing their, learning and teaching during their lessons and seminars, but actually the feedback we received was more focusing on their own learning, so how it helps them with their own studies, with their own assignments, with their own research, for example. So that was for me a very crucial moment, because to that point I really haven't really realized that it's being used in student community as much as actually they've indicated it was. So it's really positive to see how students use it, and they recommend to use it to their fellow students as well, which is rather nice. And just on the flip side, go on.
You mean that they use it to create their own sessions and own Menti? Okay, wow, yes.
Which, it wasn't the case before, because we predominantly focused on our academic colleagues to get them trained, to get them, involved using it during their lessons. But, realizing the fact that actually it's been promoted within the student communities and used for their own coursework is absolutely wonderful to know, and to see. I do have, I'm going to read it out because I copied and pasted it from the survey, this very lovely statement, if you don't mind. It's two sentences. So one of the students said, I think the university experience can be greatly improved for everyone by using Mentimeter. Students can participate without the fear of making mistakes and being judged, and the lecturers can see in real time what topics students are struggling with and what topics they have understood really well. In this way, there is no need to wait until the end of the semester for module evaluation. This happens pretty much on the go, so very convenient tool. And I love that, kind of they pinpoint not only the convenience, but the positivity of using it, which is just, really, really nice to see. And yes, thank you, Amelia. If you want to read a little bit more about this project we've done into surveying our students, then I've written a blog post. So please feel free to have a read.
Thank you so much, Marianna. I saw that the thumbs up just keep streaming in here when you were talking about, and that's really cool to hear. And I think we'll be discussing this further on. But the fact how much the anonymity helps in terms of students being able to just express truly what they don't understand without being fear of being judged. I think it's nice to see that has been received amongst the students themselves, so they understand that as well. Yeah, thank you. Let's move on to kind of the Mentimeter as a part of the wider tool belt available, and I'm going to ask Gerard around using Mentimeter with a learning management system. Is that is something that you've been doing side by side, correct? The button, we're looking for it.
Yes, the button.
There we go. Yeah.
Well, it's embeddable in a lot of platforms.
It's even embeddable, right? Yes.
So we link, so our users link it within Moodle. That's our LMS. And by embedding or direct link, that goes also for the results. So if you want students to, review, like for instance, I run quizzes where I test previously covered knowledge in a playful way, and as Mariana said, it opens, it alleviates the fear of getting it wrong. Actually, want them to get it wrong because then we can talk about it. So that's a very straightforward thing. I want to highlight that we used it in Teams a lot because, especially during the pandemic times. I'm just looking at our fever curve here of usage in number of created presentations. And from 2020 onwards, when the pandemic hit, the lockdowns happened, we moved online. That was the perfect tool for that, that you engaged students that were sitting God knows where, but participating, and you could then you could live manage and measure how engaged are they. Warm them up at the beginning with a couple of icebreaker questions, then throw in Mentimeter questions in between just to gauge knowledge retention, etc. A fun way of doing it without them being afraid something might go wrong. They might say something incorrectly. So embedding it in Teams was a big deal. And you also have the add-in in Teams, so you can directly manage Mentimeter sessions whilst you're in a live or an online session. I also use it in-class sessions, so my Teams client is up and running and used, as well as Mentimeter within the Teams client, and it's all nicely integrated. So I think the flexibility of Mentimeter to be integratable with a variety of platforms that I know of is a big boon, and also lowers the barrier of adoption by educators in
Yeah.
that regard.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I realize how important it is to have that embeddable, right? So you have everything in one place without having to go back and forth. Maybe Emilia, if you would like to maybe share, just for our lovely audience, if you want to share our integrations page, because we have, together with Microsoft Teams, we also have a Zoom integration and a newly released PowerPoint integration as well. So we're really kind of doubling down on, and from feedback like you, Gerard, like the importance of having that embeddable and having it close at hand. So you'll see that in the chat. I see we have questions coming in, 4 so far. That is excellent. Keep them coming. I'm going to move my attention to Martin. Martin, you mentioned you're going to switch to a school that does not have Mentimeter. What, except for that, you'll switch jobs. What will you lose?
I mean, yeah, lots of things in terms of my own way of working. So I use Mentimeter irrespective of whether I'm doing something that's largely didactic or massively interactive, because I think one of the things that it's easy to forget when we're so dominated by PowerPoint as the go-to tool for slide presentations, I actually don't encourage people to use the PowerPoint integration. I encourage people to use Mentimeter as their slide generating tool. And the reason for that is because you can't mess it up as much as people can with PowerPoint. Everyone must have seen animations everywhere, typewriter effect, all of that kind of stuff. You can't do any of that stuff in Mentimeter. It's much more accessible. It disciplines you to think about things, and the levels of interaction are actually much more sophisticated than at first glance you might look. So the thumbs up, thumbs down. If I have a controversial quote on the screen, I also teach history. If I have a controversial quote on there and I just have thumbs up, thumbs down, that tiny additional layer of asking the students, are you agreeing with this or not, gives a sense of buy-in. And that's even before I've got to multi-choice, open text, word cloud, Likert scales, all of the different question types. So I'd miss the ability to use that and to do that engagement stuff. But I think above all, the reason why I was able to persuade the money holders, the powers that be at Greenwich, that Mentimeter was a tool that was necessary, was because there was a problem at Greenwich that is shared probably at virtually every higher education institution I've ever come in contact with. And that is that we have quite traditional ways of working. So for the most part, the default approach is lecture seminar. Now, I know that's a massive generalization, but there's still a lot of didactic lecturing that goes on. And it doesn't matter how well intentioned you are, when you start talking about the thing that you know a lot of stuff about, it's really hard to stop yourself and give people an opportunity to process that and to get engaged. What Mentimeter does, if you use it to drive your slides, is to really push you to think, where can I have some staged and planned interaction? How could I have continuous interaction all the way through? So in other words, as a faculty developer, it is the perfect vehicle for me to talk to my colleagues and say, how didactic are you? How interactive could you be? How much more can we engage students in this? It's a tool for talking about good pedagogy. And so I'd really miss it desperately.
Thank you so much for explaining that Martin. The fact that it's not only about an interaction here and there, it's about designing the whole thing to be interactive. I think that's a very very valid point. And here I just did that very quickly. Today, for example, we're using just Mentimeter. I'm not using any other tool here. I'm not in Microsoft Teams. I mean, we're using Livestorm, of course, but this whole presentation is created within Menti. Thank you for that. Lots of thumbs up came during that as well, so that's nice to see. I am going to move on to Rob. When you're recommending Mentimeter to your colleagues, what is your what is your what is your sales pitch to them, or how do you tell them to start using Menti?
Sure. Again, I think I gave a hint of this before, that it's one of those things that it's not hard to sell, and this taps in so much to the things that Mariana has been saying and that Martin's been saying too, in terms of how flexible it is. I mean, obviously, it's not difficult to make the case that staff and students both love it. You know, that is quite a straightforward thing for us to do because of, you know, the feedback that we get, the staff saying how easy it is to pick up and run with. But I think that comes from its flexibility. And this links into what Martin was saying, that, you know, it's possible to use it in a very quick, light way without making a wholesale change to the fact that you lecture, and really improve the experience for students. You know, that might not start with allowing students to use Q&A to answer questions at any point during the lecture, but it could reach that point where, you know, you really are asking for input throughout. But it could start with something just as simple as, you know, do you agree with this? Yes, no, quick pause point, active reflection point, those sorts of things. But then we've got people going all the way through to using it to structure really interactive workshops, and, you know, that start with people giving some input about the work that they did before the workshop. Then there's a quiz on some of the activities or videos that the students were looking at beforehand. Then people do some group work and feedback using Mentimeter, a Q&A. You know, that you can sort of you can pick and choose either to use it in a very light way without fundamentally changing your pedagogy, but doing something that is actually making a difference, to go all the way through to kind of use it as a, you know, as a focus point for a much more interactive and student focused form of learning.
Yeah, and that taps back into what Martin mentioned earlier, also like having it as the central point. Thank you, Rob. Mariana, I'm interested in kind of bouncing a bit what Rob said. You know, you can either use Menti, you know, a little bit here and there, or you can do the full presentation. What is your experience with size of the audience or the classes? Is there an optimal size, or do we have going to be bigger classes, smaller? What's your take on that?
That's a really good question. I think, generally speaking, our colleagues prefer smaller groups, using them during seminars, you know, peer reviews and so on. But very recently, we have been adding an element of using Mentimeter in large classroom settings, because the feedback kind of came back from my colleagues, which indicated that actually there are some challenges when it comes to interacting with, you know, 100+ cohorts. So how do we address that? How we go about it? But it is still preferred to be used in small classes. However, the jump to the kind of larger setup is well, this is coming from my kind of personal perspective. I kind of try to bring to their attention the fact that less is many times more. And what I mean by this is thinking about the change in the dynamics in the classroom, basically promoting that active learning element, you know, flipped approaches, giving your students time and chance to think about certain topics, you know, questions, and then interact with those topics or with those elements during the live sessions. It is, you know, I'm not saying that every, you know, if we're talking about 100 people in the room, that every one of them will be interacting with your presentation, but adding those fun, you know, elements within your presentation does prove to be really, really popular, and students are kind of naturally tempted to interact with you, you know. So that is kind of our advice, you know, when we run these sessions with our colleagues, to think about the dynamics in the classroom and how you're going to promote your learning, you know, and how you're going to plan actually the session. This is going back to what Rob and Martin said before. You know, it's kind of a process. It's not a final destination, so it can be always improved, and you got to listen to your students. I think that should be in a heart of or in a center of your teaching, you know. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think this echoes also how we here at Mentimeter use Mentimeter, because we will use it in our all hands meeting, which is 300 plus people. We have offices in Stockholm in Canada to get kind of a high level overview. But in those sessions, there isn't really room for these like deeper discussions or insights. While as if we're in a workshop with 8 people, you can really get like meaningful discussions going. I see. Thank you, Martin, Rob, and Gerard have written a bit about like max users. Martin mentioned you had 500, but that might put a strain on the Wi-Fi also. Yeah.
I just think that there are other structural issues around this. One of the things about Mentimeter, though, that you learn, irrespective of group size, people often say, yeah, but what if students haven't got devices of their own? I say it doesn't matter. One of the things that I will always say to people if I'm running a session is, there is a Mentimeter. This is how you access it, much as you did at the beginning of this session. Join it if you want. Or maybe better still, lean over to the person next to you who's already got their smartphone out and nudge them and try and persuade them to answer in a different way. So rather than isolating students into individual cognitive silos, use it as a stimulus to encourage them to talk more about the thing before committing to a response. So if only half the students have got devices, actually, I think that's an advantage. And you can then ease the load on the Wi-Fi network at the same time. So you can always turn these things to your advantage.
Excellent comment. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. To that's like a meta level of Menti as well, where you through half of us using it, you create more discussion. I'm curious to head over to Gerard if you have any best practices around the tool or in ways that you think it really has impact.
Can give you an example of how I use it in 2 of my modules, because those students are typically in the know that they are my lab rats for trying out things. And even before the pandemic, I started doing a so-called pub quiz league. So you have this slide type which is a timed multiple choice quiz, right? And it took a bit of a trial and error in the beginning, but what I do is, for those that are not familiar with that slide type, you have a timed question. You can set the timing on each question, and the faster a student answers, the more points they get, and obviously it needs to be a correct answer. So I then did that on a range or a series of these quizzes across the year. Not every session, because you don't want to overdo it, because you don't want to just flog them because it's there every time with it. It needs to be a reason for using it, that it's clear to the students. And then I added up the points that they earned. So you have the nice leaderboard, and then I started actually after suggestion by Martin, who observed me for the Empowered Presenter scheme back then, for a leaderboard in the middle, so they can see where are we. We're halfway through, and there's another so many to go. And once I got the hang of how to run it properly quiz-wise, and Rob mentioned a 70s quiz master, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm embracing this. I love this. And then we run this through, and I, of course, explain everything. If there's a lot of wrong answers, that's perfect, actually, because then I can hook into that for revision, explain why is this right, why is this wrong. And then we go on, and I add up to points that they earn. So I ask them to pick a nickname, but stick with the nickname so I can add up the points. And then I publish a pub quiz league ranking every week after we have run such a quiz. And you would not believe how competitive they are. Or how they get. I get messages then on Teams typically before a session. Gerhard, is there another quiz coming? Because I need to catch up. And this is perfect because, of course, there might be an argument. Are you not increasing an anxiety level? And the fact is, and I found, no, because after a while they see what's the point. They need to get prepared. If we're wrong, okay. We can use that. That's a learning outcome. That's something that we can use and improve it. And then they start preparing and revising throughout the year and get better. And that's so encouraging to see in a fun way. And that's one of the practices that I've done now for a couple of years. And it's wonderful that when Mentimeter gives you that opportunity in their tool with that.
Thank you, Gerhard. That is really fun to hear, and I can see how the competitiveness really helps to get people engaged. We of course don't really have time today to showcase any actual quizzes. Emilia, maybe if you want to send, if anybody's interested in doing one of these, we have a bunch of quiz templates that you can
Sure.
open in your accounts. I think these are all so interesting points here today. We could be talking for hours, but I think I do want to move on to some of the audience questions because I see we've gotten quite a few, which is awesome. So I want to tell our lovely audience to also open the Q&A and go ahead and upvote the questions that you'd like to see. You have a little thumb here next to the questions, and this is a nice little feature, and then that'll get ranked higher. And I think we'll bring in some audience questions here from the Menti. Let's see. Here's your controversial quote there, Martin, with a thumbs up. Yes. What is the biggest impact Menti has had on your students? I think we've heard this for both Rob and Mariana. Martin, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. Like when you use Menti in a way like where you have you prompt these discussions. How do you see that impacting your students' learning?
I think what is critical for me is that if you're interested in social justice, in equity, in democratizing learning, then Mentimeter is a tool that can help facilitate that. It needs careful management, but if I put 200 people in a room, an electronic room in Zoom or Teams, or in Livestorm, or in a physical space, and I ask a question, I know that straight away hands will go up on the front row. There'll be someone that's keen to say their thing. And, if I want an easy life, I can just go to that person. They can give me a right answer and I can move on. And actually, by doing that, I probably haven't given half or maybe even more of the audience a time to even process that. They may process things a little bit more slowly. They may be working in a second language. They may have conceptually struggled to understand what it was that I was teaching. But by doing something like this, I'm pushing that good pedagogic practice that we all need a certain amount of processing time. So I ask a question, and instead of waiting for a hands up or somebody to jump in, I'll put it through Mentimeter, gives everybody a chance to process their idea. They can all contribute. They may be right, they may be wrong, but the processing of it is critical. It's democratizing things. And I think that is, for me, the biggest impact that it's having on students. I don't even know if they know that unless I meta level it and start, talking about the actual processes that are happening and the reasons for that. I mean, I think I've heard quite a lot of people from time to time saying, oh, yeah, Mentimeter saturation, don't use it too much. And that's wise with any tool. But actually, we use PowerPoint every single blooming day. And although people talk about death by PowerPoint, there aren't that many students who come out on a gurney from a lecture. So they can adapt to that. But why not layer on interactivity? Because it's doing a lot more besides what is obvious and visible. And I think that is the biggest impact on students from my point of view.
Yeah. Is that a discussion that you would or is that a perspective you would lift with your students as well, like the meta approach to learning, or because as you said, like they don't even know it themselves what's happening?
I think a lot of people do that, but that's a personal choice. I mean, I'm very much of the school of thought that encourages colleagues to articulate the rationale for their teaching approaches with their students, particularly if you're trying to change things up. Students come to university very often with a popular culture representation expectation. They think they're going to go to Cambridge and sit in a big lecture hall and be dazzled by the most charismatic lecturer and then sit in a book-lined room talking through their essays. Well, unless we challenge that stereotype and that expectation, they're going to end up disappointed, aren't they? And at the same time, you know, if I want the students to engage rather than just telling them to do it, what better than to say, this is why this is a good thing to do? So articulating that and encouraging students to think about that is part of my repertoire. It's not for everybody, but it's definitely something I'd recommend.
Thank you very much. I'm interested to hear more about using Menti in an online asynchronous training course. I don't know if we have time to cover this. Maybe someone in the panel has experience. Gerard, you mentioned when using it in Microsoft Teams. Have you experienced it with asynchronicity, or is it more of a live thing then?
Well, if I use the term training for teaching sessions and in between teaching sessions, then yes, especially during the pandemic, that was very important. That not only that we have something during the sessions, but also in between. Those, of course, they can't be timed. They should go through those in their own time. And what I observed, at least in my context, was a very high level of engagement. So I could see, are they doing something in between those sessions? How well and engaging with it? Are they revising? So I gave them advice. Okay, look at that stuff before, and then answer the questions, go through those, helped me gauge how much they were in it. That was especially important during the pandemic, where I couldn't see them on a regular basis. So I had no clue, and Mentimeter gave me a very good view on the activity and their knowledge. And if I saw things are trailing off, then I could include that into my next sessions and address this. And also I talked to the students about what I observed, and then why am I emphasizing a specific topic in a revision, for instance, even more so. I think it's a very important thing if you use this online asynchronous. I still use it offline asynchronous in a way that we are back on campus and they get their Mentimeters in between as well as a tool, self-paced tool. I give them the reason why. Why does it benefit you? What do you learn from it? Don't be afraid to be wrong. You can always look at your results and then revise, get in touch with me. I give you new materials and so on. But it's a good door opener and leverage for in between. So yes, use it asynchronously.
Nice. I see Emilia posted a video that you made here as well. So feel free to check that out. I could just briefly, we won't have time to like look into the details here, but in Menti, it is possible to set the pace for the voting. So you can decide if you want to have a live presentation, or, as we've mentioned here, an audience pace, which means that the students can step through it by themselves. So that's really, really handy. Maybe, Emilia, you want to send a help article on that, perhaps. What are your best practices around engaging virtual versus hybrid classrooms? Mariana, do you have any best practices tips here?
Oscar, I hoped you ain't gonna pick on me, but well, the hybrid, so Cardiff University, we are quite I guess cautious in terms of going to as far as hybrid classrooms. Obviously, during the pandemic, yes, we were very much engaged virtually, so the classrooms and students. But now, pretty much, 90% of the university is back on campus. To be honest with you, so it is. Although I'm not saying we are not using it, just like you mentioned, we are also using it asynchronously, or it's very popular with flipped classroom approaches. And just like Gerhard, you mentioned before, the main kind of point here is to explain why we're using and why we're doing what we're doing with the students. If they are sent away to engage, to answer certain questions in their own pace and in their own time. So that is, I guess, kind of main focus is that flipped approach in Cardiff Uni.
Bouncing off that, I know at Mentimeter we do hybrid meetings as our standard, since we have people working in the office in Stockholm and people working from home and people working in Canada in our other office. And I think one way that's really worked well with a hybrid approach with Mentimeter is that you use the Menti as your single source of truth. So if you're going to discuss something, if you want to add input, for example, the questions here, you always use the Menti, because that is something that everybody can access. The risk is if you open up the word for everybody, it's going to be the people in the room or people who feel most comfortable. But I think that has helped us a lot, and especially in our bigger meetings, if we use Mentimeter, we will say that Menti decides what we do, because that levels the playing field between the people who might be remote, on camera, or camera off or on. So that's a bit of a small tip from our side. So many questions now coming in. We're running out of time. I want to go through a few more. We talked about this earlier. I currently use PowerPoint to generate slides. What beginner's advice or tips would you give to switch over to using Mentimeter to generate slides? I can cover this, but I'm more curious to maybe hear Rob here. You mentioned sometimes smaller presentations and also big ones. Do you have any experience here and tips on how to switch over to Menti fully?
Yeah, people do regularly come through with questions. They usually start with, I want to get Mentimeter into a PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And because of the way we're set up at York and the way our Office 365 works, that really causes insurmountable sort of challenges. So we tend to recommend I think it's still in beta mode, but it's possible to create a window on your Mentimeter slide to show an online PowerPoint, or in our case, a Google slide behind that, which keeps the, any animations, any embedded videos, or any things like that. So where people are looking for that. I think when you import slide by slide, there are issues there around the use of alt text and accessibility if you're going to be sharing that as a resource with students after a session. So we try to encourage people, if they are going to do that, to make to make sure that the version they share with students is accessible, which can be challenging. But then I suppose ultimately, if people are creating using the content slides in Menti, there's a little bit of a mind shift, I think, in terms of how you lay things out, how much space you have for text and images and so on. Where people are using a lot of interactivity, that feels much more natural. But where people are just trying to drop in a couple of key points of interactivity, maybe it's not worth the pain for some staff to do that. So I guess we take a different approach depending on what type of context and the size of the session and things like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes it might be enough for some people to just have the single question in Menti, and it does require, as you're saying, if you want it to be fully accessible, if you want the voting link to look nice, it helps to create it Menti. And Mariana mentioned here, which I was going to mention earlier as well, that we at Mentimeter provide a lot of trainings as well on this exact topic. We have a Mentimeter Academy. It's a free training, about 45 minutes. And I highly recommend to check that out, because there we look at creating, just as we've done today. I mean, this is a small, it's only 11 slides here, but that'll give you a full walkthrough. Let's see. I'd be interested if Menti is open to use to your students. Mariana, you mentioned this, that it was for you. Rob, I'm seeing a nod there as well. Martin, do you, does anybody want to voice over this?
Just to say that I think, at Greenwich and at UCL, part of the agreement was that anybody with a universityapp.ac.uk email address had access as an author, and I think it's a great thing to have, because students lead the way. They provide examples of how it can be used. I did a case study recently with students in psychology who were using it to drive a journal club, and it actually motivated members of the academic team to use it more when they saw the way that the students were using it. So I think that is really powerful as well. Students are very flexible and creative as well. So you use it in a particular way, and I think we are in HE tending to have that delivery mindset. And then you see somebody using it as a research tool or something to stimulate connections for an event, or what would be your preferred thing to do on the last day of term. And suddenly you start thinking, actually, this isn't just a teaching tool. This isn't PowerPoint Plus. It is more than that. And I think that involving students and giving students access is the right way forward. I'm not quite sure how it works at the the negotiation level, but at both my institutions, students have access and they use it all the time. Yeah.
Nice, very nice to hear. Do you use Menti for other purposes than teaching? Gerard, you mentioned the pub quiz kind of thing. Is there anybody else who use it? I think we've mentioned also like teaching teachers as well, like staff training and so forth. Rob, do you have anything additional here?
A lot of our teams that interface with the community love to use it to go out into, say into schools for widening participation activities, or, other sort of outreach type work and things like that. It's been used. Another example, there was a logo competition connected to a particular research project that they had lots of fun using Mentimeter to organize the submission and voting of the logos and come up with a winner and things like that. It's used. It's occasionally seen in staff-facing conferences, but you're getting me thinking here that it is still something that is maybe seen primarily as for use in teaching and learning, and why don't we have it more in board of studies meetings and things like that?
Yeah, I saw Gerard put in here conference presentations.
Yeah, I'm aware that many of our research active members of staff use it. It's also been used by students in students' research conferences for engaging the audience. So throwing in an interactive question in between, for example. And I've used it, especially in online conferences. It was wonderful, because then I could see the engagement with my own presentation there by the audience. And yes, it's definitely been used not just for teaching.
Yeah, very nice. It's so fun hearing all these examples, and it's interesting hearing the teaching side of things. I mean, I come from a teaching background way back, but recently we are a Mentimeter here. We're only using it in like a business context, right? So we're doing meetings and we're doing planning sessions and we're doing check-ins and workshops and all of those different use cases for Mentimeter as well. And it's working amazingly for us to really get that attention and interaction in like a business setting as well. I don't think we have time for one more. Let's just see if this is a small or a big one. Do you have an unlimited version of Mentimeter so we can invite all students to use it as well? I'm going to throw this to Emilia in terms of inviting students, how that works.
Yes, absolutely. So we do have our campus-wide plan, which gives you unlimited licenses for Mentimeter. And then once your institution has that campus-wide plan, you can invite as many students or staff members as you'd like.
Wonderful. And that leads us greatly into our final slide here. If you're interested, anybody in the audience interested in learning more about all the beautiful things we've heard today, please send us an email. And I would like to say a huge thank you to all the panelists here today. Such a wonderful group of people here and very good insights. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. And thank you for the audience today as well, who's been putting out those thumbs up throughout the whole presentation. I think that is pretty much it. We're right on the hour. Emilia, any closing remarks?
I just wanted to say thank you to all the panelists, but also to all of our participants. Great activity in the chat. It's been a pleasure hearing all of your use cases and ideas around Mentimeter as well. So thanks, everyone.
Great. And yes, for the panelists, I hope to talk to you soon again. And until next time, bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a lovely
Excellent.
afternoon.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.